Welcome. This series explores a wide variety of issues related to peace, social and economic justice, the environment, and nonviolent social change. We especially provide opportunities for the public to hear voices and viewpoints that are rarely heard in mainstream media. Mainstream media, politicians, and culture see the world in conventional ways. The establishment is stuck in how they see the world. In order to solve problems, we need to see things differently. This TV series, Glen's Parallax Perspectives, can help us see things differently so we can solve problems at all levels, from the local to the global. This series is called Glen's Parallax Perspectives. Here's what the word parallax means. Put one finger in front of your nose and another finger farther away. Close one eye, then open that eye and close the other. Your fingers will seem to move. This is called a parallax view. This TV series invites you to look at issues from fresh perspectives. This month's interview on Glen's Parallax Perspective will inform us about an interesting and inspiring community in Guatemala where refugees from the previous dictatorship have settled into a new community. These people are empowering themselves at the grassroots to meet their needs for education, clean water, social justice, and democracy. About 300 to 400 people live in Nuevo Amanecer, the Spanish word for new dawn. The community was founded in 1998 by refugees who had fled the genocide and scorched earth campaign of the 1980s and 1990s. The U.S. had been funding and training Guatemala's brutal military to commit those crimes. In early 2018, a volcano erupted in Guatemala, so now the world's people have noticed Guatemala, which normally is ignored, but this was only brief and superficial awareness. The brutal realities in Guatemala had long existed, but the rest of the world paid little attention until this volcanic eruption in June 2018. Now the New Dawn community of Nuevo Amanecer is making bold progress at the grassroots level for social justice and community self-empowerment. During this hour, we'll learn a lot about this inspiring example. I'm happy to welcome Joe Swaya, who volunteers with New Dawn Guatemala, a Seattle-based nonprofit organization that supports Nuevo Amanecer. We will learn a lot from and be inspired by Joe. He's been working vigorously and skillfully as a volunteer with them. Good to have you here, Joe.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
I appreciate Joe. He was a guest on our program dealing with East Timor in the southwestern part of the Pacific Ocean back in August of 2005. It's good to have Joe here again with us. He has a long background working for solidarity work, for international communities working for peace, human rights, and democracy. He also is a high school teacher and has done other positive work to make the world a better place. So we'll have some interesting conversation here about this. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for doing this. Could you explain what the community of Nuevo Amanecer is, how it came into being, and we'll discuss some more of the specifics after this video that we'll watch lays out some information.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. So New Dawn, Nuevo Amanecer, really came about as a result of the social justice movement in Guatemala in the 1970s and 80s. Guatemala had had a democratic regime for 10 years between 1945 and 1954. They were unfortunately overthrown brutally and violently by the Guatemalan military and with the help of the U.S. So that resulted in a number of dictatorships that repressed the population and left most people landless and starving. In the 70s and 80s, there was a very strong grassroots movement to democratize Guatemala, to go back to the reforms of the previous democracy, to divide up land, and have justice for the majority of the population who are indigenous. There's a tremendous repression of these people, and so New Dawn really came about as a result of the people who had to flee from the tremendous violence and repression that uprooted them from their homelands, made them flee to Mexico. When they were in Mexico, they had to stay 10, 15, 17 years sometimes. They banded together, realized that they all had the same ideals of a more just, more democratic Guatemala, and they came back to Guatemala after the Civil War was over, and they founded a community based on the ideals they all had of social justice and democracy.
Yeah, that's a great story, and in a few minutes we'll watch this 18-minute video where the people are speaking from their own experience,
Yes.
with their own hopes and their own passion for getting education and meeting community needs. It's a great video. I want to do a little bit more groundwork so that people
Yes.
watching the show will know this. The video is produced by Seattle-based nonprofit organization New Dawn Guatemala,
Yes.
and that you actively work with to support their efforts. Can you summarize New Dawn Guatemala's work based in Seattle, but really in solidarity with these people in Guatemala?
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. We were founded in 2013, and we work very closely. We talk to them every week with the community of Nuevo Amanecer or New Dawn Guatemala, and we try to work with them to help them. We try to work in solidarity with them to provide whatever things they request if we're able to do it, and so far we're happy we've been able to do it because of the generosity and solidarity of the people of Seattle and the surrounding area. They ask us for things like funds for scholarships and job training for students, as we'll learn in the video, who can't go to school many times after the age of 14, or sometimes even the age of 12. Clean water systems, things to commemorate their beautiful history. So whatever they ask for, and they do it democratically, debating with their committees what they need, we try to raise money with people who have good heart and goodwill and want to provide that solidarity and replace some of the things the U.S. took away by our negative military aid and that kind of thing. So yeah, we work in partnership with them to provide the things that they ask for.
Yeah, it's a good model, and it's egalitarian in the sense that it's a real solidarity thing.
Very much so. We're not telling them that this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
No. They say this is what we need for our development, and we try to provide funds if we can.
Yeah, that's good. So in just a moment now, we'll watch this brand new 18-minute video about Nuevo Amanecer. Much of this video features local people.
Yes.
They're speaking for themselves, which is cool, with English subtitles. And there's also parts with a faculty member from the University of Washington who provides some historical context.
Yes.
And it's great. Is there anything else we need to know before we watch this video?
I guess I just want to say that I think that we worked very closely with the video to make the video with the community there, and we hope that it really tells their beautiful story, a story of violent expulsion and beautiful return to build a community of democracy and social justice.
When I watched this, I was impressed by their positive attitude and their forward-looking. You know, they knew what the past had been, which was hard.
Yes.
But they're very much looking forward and determined to build a great little community there.
Tremendously resilient, and I think the name of their community really says it all. A new dawn. That's what they're looking for. A new dawn for Guatemala.
So the video, let's watch this now. It runs 18 minutes and 14 seconds, and Joe and I'll be here waiting for you when you finish watching the video. Thanks.
Por las becas, porque el dinero que tienen no les alcanza. Como pueden ver aquí en Nuevo Amanecer, lo único que lo sostiene es la cosecha de café que está en la finca, pero es muy poco la economía que llega al hogar, y los padres no tienen nuestros padres no tienen un empleo como sostener. Solo ellos se dedican a cosechar maíz, frijol, todo lo que llega al hogar, y nuestras madres, como son mujeres sin ni una preparación, solo se dedican a ser amas de hogar, o si ellas son creativas, solo se dedican a vender, cosas que aquí no alcanzan en nuestra familia, y son pocos los recursos y son pocas las esperanzas para seguir estudiando. Sé que tenemos mucho talento y no amanecer. Sé que nuestro talento se quisiera demostrar y seguir aprendiendo más acerca de esto, pero para aprender más, si uno quisiera seguirse superándose en lo que es el talento, necesita un estudio, porque cada cosa que nosotros llevamos dentro necesitamos un estudio, pero por falta de la economía uno no puede sobresalirse, ¿verdad? Para mí la idea central de Nuevo Amanecer es que aquí la gente valora todo lo que nos da la tierra, lo que valora nuestras culturas. Es una gente muy unida, muy respetuosa, muy responsable. Les gusta hacer las cosas bien, son muy divertidos igual. Igual son muy apegados a lo que es nuestras culturas que ellos han traído de donde vinieron hasta donde están. De igual manera ellos son muy valorativos. Quisiera que los que nos están mirando estuvieran en nuestro aniversario porque ahí se puede ver todo lo que nosotros llevamos dentro y podemos sacar en ese día. Pueden ver en la noche cultural, se da una breve historia de lo que es Nuevo Amanecer y sería muy apreciable que ellos pudieran venir y mirar qué fue Nuevo Amanecer y cómo vivió en las épocas de guerra, de sufrimiento, de hambre, de angustia por no ver a su familia. Perdieron muchas familias y
Two successive presidential administrations from 1944 to 1954 are remembered in Guatemala still to this day as the 10 years of spring, and the first flourishing of democracy that that country had ever seen, literally in its history. These were two presidents whose policies we would today characterize as progressive. They included the legalization of trade unions, for example, of the Communist Party, the extension of suffrage to women, and a whole host of social programs aimed at bolstering education, access to health, and other programs like that in a country that had for too long seen virtually no policies aimed at the average man or woman. So the idea behind the agrarian reform that Guatemala instituted during those 10 years of spring was to take some of that land that was held by large individual landowners to compensate the company or individual who owned that land at the value that they had declared it to be worth in their last tax return, and then to turn over that land to some of the peasants who were literally starving, lacking access to land, so that they could have plots of land to cultivate for themselves and for their families. So this was passed as a law. It entailed compensation, as I said, to the United Fruit Company and other large landowners at the value that they had declared the land to be worth. But it wasn't optional. And United Fruit decided, first of all, they didn't want to sell that land, and second of all, they didn't want to sell it at the price they had declared it to be worth. And that's where the problems arose that eventually led faithfully to the overthrow of the Guatemalan government by forces supported by the United States CIA. One very important thing to keep in mind is that, of course, this was happening during the Cold War, at the height of the Cold War. And so when people in the United Fruit Company are connected to the United Fruit Company, many of whom occupied key positions in the United States government. In fact, key trustees and shareholders of the United Fruit were in absolutely pivotal positions of the U.S. government at the time of the coup. These people were very easily persuaded by others in United Fruit that these policies were tantamount to communism and therefore a threat to United States national security. That argument, therefore, which was generated by people looking out for their own personal resources and for the bottom line of United Fruit as a corporation, pretty rapidly led to decisions by the U.S. government to support forces to overthrow the Guatemalan government. The results of the coup were felt immediately. President Jacobo Arbenz, democratically elected president, was shipped out of the country in his underwear in a famous act of humiliation. Colonel Castillo Armas was installed as Washington's man in Central America, in Guatemala. And very rapidly, I'm talking about in a matter of hours, lists of targeted individuals were drawn up. And in the CIA's own history of their involvement, they acknowledged that they helped in the drawing up of these lists. Those lists included the names of people who were known to be trade unionists, for example, on United Fruit plantations. Also advocates of different social democratic policies, certainly many key individuals in the Arbenz government, and others who were associated with these 10 years of spring and many of the progressive policies that they had swept in. So those lists of opponents very rapidly turned into essentially hit lists. Many people on those lists were rounded up, summarily executed, often tortured brutally before their death. Many fled into exile or otherwise tried to save their lives, but there's many, many stories of extremely rapid action after the government fell, where people knew they had to take to the hills to save their lives. So you can draw a pretty direct line between the repression that was seen literally in the hours following the fall of the Arbenz government and then the series of repressive governments that occupied Guatemala for decades. This was one after another, essentially right-wing governments, dictators, occasionally juntas, different individuals who were active in rolling back many of those reforms that had been passed into law during the 10 years of spring, sowing terror among the population, ruling by fear and often by fiat, all the way through the Guatemalan Civil War. So the Guatemalan army made a strategic decision to adopt what we often quote, actually it's a phrase from Mao Zedong, to drain the water from the fish as its way of defeating the guerrilla movement. And what does that mean? Well, the idea being, if you can see the fish swimming in the pond, you can reach in and pull it out, right? But if you can't identify the fish, in other words, if you can't tell in a given community who is a guerrilla and who's simply a peasant member of the community, maybe not affiliated with the guerrilla, one way to ensure that that guerrilla fish, if you will, dies is to drain the pond, right? If you can't pull the fish out of the pond, you can drain the pond and the fish will die. That metaphor becomes particularly disturbing when we realize that the pond in which the guerrilla fish swam was the civilian population. The generations that are today working for democracy in Guatemala carry on their shoulders the legacies of a genocide, and that's not something that's easily erased. It's not something that can be laid uniquely at the foot of the United States. Many, many forces contributed to making that happen. But unfortunately, I do think that the United States played a decisive and, on balance, not a positive role in bringing about that devastating chapter in Guatemalan history.
Nosotros los jóvenes apreciamos lo que ha sufrido la gente mayor, como de igual manera a veces nos ponemos como que a analizar, gracias a Dios no lo vivimos y gracias a ello nosotros tenemos un lugarcito donde estar, como igual a nuestro párroco que acaba de fallecer, como lo saben, nos ayudó a que nosotros viniéramos acá. Como igual cuando nos cuentan las historias de ellos nos conmueve mucho y decimos qué sufrimiento tan grande pudieron vivir ellos en lo que es la guerra, lo que fue eso y otras cosas. Cómo es que ellos aguantaron todo lo que viven y sí se siente un dolor grande dentro de nosotros y sí lo apreciamos.
Pues lo que hice, yo lo que la salida que yo hice me fui aquí en mi país, por lo mismo el ejército entró a secuestrar toda la gente, todos los hombres lo llevó el ejército, las mujeres se quedaron viudas, hasta yo también me quedé porque yo tenía mi esposa, pero lamentablemente el ejército lo llevó y lo secuestraron, ya no supe la razón para dónde se quedaron, ya no supimos la razón en dónde están, porque uno no sabe qué es lo que estaba pasando con el ejército, qué es lo que estaba pasando con nuestra familia. Pero yo en mi aldea, es una aldea, se fue arrasada. Y por el ejército toda la gente. Pues no soy yo, me quedé sola. Mis 3 hermanas secuestró el ejército, una hermana y 2 hermanos varones. Que lo veo mi esposa, y luego mis tías, todo. Se quedó la aldea sin persona. Y de ahí esa aldea salimos todos juntos. No sé, para cada quien agarró su camino. A ver dónde se fueron a recoger. Y al otro día salí yo, me fui para México. Esa es la que fue mi salida de mí, me fui para México. Fui a refugiarse en México. Pero a través de eso aquí estoy. Lo que yo sufrí, lo que yo viví. A mí, yo le digo, yo no sé de mi familia dónde se quedaron, dónde están, no sé nada de ellos. Porque ya a mí me contaban a mí que los mataron. No sé de dónde están los cuerpos, yo no sé nada. Y esa es la salida que se hizo para México, me fui para México solito yo. Y dejamos nuestros terrenos, dejamos todo lo que tenías en la casa. Y todo lo que uno tiene, y yo me fui con mi ropa así como estoy. Solo con él me fui para México. Yo no llevé nada, todo lo dejamos. Y todo lo que salieron, todas las personas que salieron también así fueron también. Porque no solo yo, es una aldea completa, se quedó arrasada por el ejército. Y hasta eso, las personas que estaban en la casa, los quemaron en la casa. Y adentro, lo encerraban la persona adentro. Ahí se quedaban muertas adentro, se quemaban. Y ahí cuando vivimos en México, nos discriminaban mucho, que nosotros no éramos mexicanos, que somos guatemaltecos, que somos Nos decían que éramos cachucos, porque así le decían los guatemaltecos. Nos discriminaban mucho. Pero durante eso, los 17 años que estuvimos en México, ya la gente ya nos expresaban bien, nos querían estar en México, porque ya nuestros hijos allá nacieron, allá crecieron, ahí tuvieron estudio, allá estudiaron en México. Pero sí nos discriminaban mucho.
The work of the Guatemalan communities, many of them indigenous communities, but certainly not all, to recapture those roots and to reinvigorate them and to share that with one another and with the world is something I admire tremendously. It speaks to an incredible spirit of resilience, just an incredible wealth that despite all of these challenges and against all odds, people managed to maintain.
Mañana se celebra el aniversario, 18 años, y es muy importante para nosotros recordar estos momentos que año con año estamos viviendo, porque hay mucha gente, mucha comida, música. También se preparan las comidas especiales. Me siento muy orgullosa de formar parte de la comunidad de Nuevo Amanecer, porque somos personas organizadas, comunicativas, y que siempre participamos en muchas actividades y se ha venido desarrollando a través del tiempo y a diferencia de otras hemos tenido más proyectos, como por ejemplo la escuela. Es un proyecto muy grande que a Nuevo Amanecer satisfactoriamente. Aprecio mucho la solidaridad de ustedes por las becas que han enviado a esta comunidad, porque muchos jóvenes, señoritas, se han graduado y han podido obtener un trabajo a base de eso y han salido adelante. tanto como los padres y los hijos que reciben las becas, es de mucha ayuda para esta comunidad.
Antes de las becas, no había yo pensado que mi hija iba a estudiar. Las becas cambiaron nuestra vida y de mis hijas. Otra vez quiero decir las gracias, con todo mi corazón les doy gracias a los que nos están dando ese apoyo.
Stand by.
I enjoyed watching this video. It was not only informative, but it was really inspiring. And I'm glad that you arranged this so that people could do their own speaking for themselves. That's just really...
Thank you so much. That's what we wanted, is to allow the community to be able to tell their own story.
Yeah. Can we get into some more of the historical context? The woman with the academic background...
Angelina Godoy, Professor Godoy, yes.
Did an excellent job. I wonder if you could summarize the historical context and provide any other useful information to help us understand the community's origin, the people and their needs.
Yes, I think that New Dawn is like many thousands of communities in Guatemala who were struggling for social justice and democracy in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the government of Guatemala decided to try to just stamp that out. You know, people were trying to peacefully make change, and the government said, no, you can't do that. We're going to maintain this situation where we have a small group of wealthy people with all the power and all the privileges, and the people who wanted to change that peacefully and democratically, the government tried to stamp them out. They tried to eradicate them physically. And it was, as the UN accurately said, I think, an attempted cultural genocide of the indigenous population and others who resisted. So New Dawn, and not only New Dawn, many other communities had to flee. They had to flee for their lives because their family members were being killed, tortured, raped, and in many cases they fled internally, but in some cases they left the country, went to Chiapas. And
in the southern part of Mexico.
The southern part of Mexico, yes. And so, like many communities, many people in Guatemala, the residents of New Dawn they just had to make their way in another country, in another land, a very difficult situation. And so, you know, they're really kind of a microcosm of what happened to so many people in Guatemala. They're unique in the sense that they were able to make connections with each other and with Father Juan Jose Aldaz, a Catholic priest who believed in social justice, and they were able to take advantage of some of the positive aspects of the peace accords, which called for land for people who had been involved in the conflict. So they got some land, even though it wasn't the best land, it was coffee banana land. And they came back, and although they didn't have a lot of infrastructure, they did have that shared commitment to democracy and social justice, and that's really what's kept the community together.
Yeah, so they were able to really form community while they were in exile.
Yes.
And then come back.
That's right.
Even though many of them had not known each other before.
They had not known each other before.
They had come from different parts of Guatemala.
Exactly. They were from different parts of Guatemala, but they found what they had in common was this tremendous desire to not let the embers of social justice die out, even though the government was trying to stamp out anything related to democracy or social justice.
And the experience that those folks had should give us in the United States some insight into some of the people who are fleeing here as refugees now from different places. The government of Honduras, for example, is extremely brutal, extremely violent. They had a democracy, and the United States supported a coup there by Honduras's military and their business elite. It was Obama and Hillary Clinton, his Secretary of State, that supported the coup, and the Organization of American States, all the rest of the Latin American nations said, no, this is wrong. The United States said, no, that we're going to do this, or this is okay. And since then, the government, the military and the police in Honduras have been slaughtering journalists and human rights workers and labor organizers and all kinds of folks, and people are having to flee. And these kinds of problems are happening in a lot of places. So some of the people coming to the US border have a legitimate claim to seek asylum because their lives are in danger, and in some cases their family members have been killed, as was the case with this community in Guatemala.
Most certainly. I mean, people are fleeing for their lives in Guatemala, and I think it's important to look at New Dawn as an example of why people flee and why people stay. In the case of New Dawn, not to romanticize them or act like everything's perfect there, because they continue to have many problems, but because of their own commitment to democracy and social justice, combined with our solidarity, our ability to provide through a little bit of money, enough money for them to go to school, folks now there have a chance to get a decent paying job in many cases. And so you don't find people fleeing New Dawn in the same way you do other communities in Guatemala. Why is that? They have hope. They have some pathways for the future. So I think we need to look at the roots of why people are fleeing. They're fleeing because they have very few viable options.
And why have some people in Guatemala stayed during all that time of trouble?
Exactly. Well, I think in New Dawn and some other communities that have also maintained that commitment to social justice, they have a feeling that they have a say over everything in the community. For example, even the scholarships, people debate that. They have meetings and they figure out who needs the scholarships the most. They have a women's committee. They have a committee that deals with the clean water system and implementing it. So people in New Dawn have a say over every aspect of their community. They feel that connection, that voice that they have, and also because of their own efforts and also because of our solidarity, they have opportunities to get jobs rather than simply working in the coffee and banana fields, which used to be the only viable choice for many people. Now they get jobs for things like motorcycle mechanics, nurses' assistants, graphic designers, things that have career pathways that can make a decent living in many cases, and so people are not fleeing at nearly the same rate. We've had a few people who have left Guatemala over the years, have left New Dawn for the US, but very, very few. Most of them stay in their community, and they feel like they have a voice and they have some pathways for the future.
You've mentioned the scholarship program, and this was emphasized in the video that we saw. The video was really celebrating support for the children's education, which is a positive thing in any community. You want, whatever community you're in whatever country, you want people in the community to say, we want our kids to get educated. Most definitely. That's a positive thing. And why is it that kids need scholarships after the age of 12 or 14 or something?
Right.
What happens?
Well, in Guatemala, Glen, so the government provides basic education, but after the age of 12, although in theory education is free, it's really not after the age of 12. In Guatemala, they have to pay for things like uniforms, tuition, transportation, books. And so as a practical matter, most families in New Dawn can simply not afford to keep their kids in school after the age of 12. So that's where our solidarity comes in. And since 2013, they've been asking us every year. They'll send us a particular request for a number of students, and we have been able, through the generosity and solidarity of people in Seattle, to provide funds for people to continue in high school. They have a high school right there in New Dawn that's very well thought of. And then after the age of 16 or 17 to do what they call carrera, meaning kind of like vocational education. So we funded those two programs for high school. And also once people graduate from high school, they choose a career path. And they go to school in the nearby town of Coatepeque. And we're very proud that we've helped over 30 people to graduate from the technical school. And there's all of them except for 2 have gotten jobs, and they're jobs that are not super well paid, but they're far better than the banana and coffee fields, and they provide career pathways and allow them to explore things they're really interested in.
So if your only vision of the future is, I'm going to be stuck picking bananas and coffee, that's not much of a future to look to. And when we were preparing for the program, you told me about some previous filming.
Yeah.
Where tell us the story about this
Yeah, well,
gentleman that responded to that.
Exactly. Well, we were filming about 2 or 3 years ago in the community, Glen, and we had asked a lot of the scholarship recipients to talk about their experiences, and they and their parents talked about how important it was that they could get these jobs they could never have gotten before without the scholarships, and thanking us for that. But when we got done with the filming, one of the older guys said, you know, the money and the jobs are very, very important, the career pathways, but what's maybe even more important is the hope that the scholarships have engendered because of your solidarity. Because he said if you talk to students before, they'd say, what are you going to do when you graduate? Well, I don't know, what are you going to do? I guess we just have to work in the coffee fields or the banana fields, or we can try to go to Guatemala City, but there isn't really very much going on there to get a job. Now you hear kids talking, they're saying, hey, did you hear Gloria got a job as a nurse? She went to the university. Did you hear that Alma, got a job as a cook, or some of the people got jobs as graphic designers? There's more hope, there's more options and possibilities for the future. So it's not just the money and the jobs, but just the possibilities for the future that I think the solidarity, and we do consider it solidarity, not charity, has opened up for the people of New Dawn.
And so what about the older teenagers and young adults? What the education goes beyond the early years, right?
Yes.
So what for older teens?
Well, so they'll
adults?
study, once they graduate from high school, they'll do what's called a carrera, and they'll go to the town of Coatepeque. It's about 15 minutes away, and there's all kinds of things they can study there. They've studied graphic design. We've had a young woman who studied gastronomy, so she's now, she's gotten a job as a cook. You have people that are motorcycle mechanics. You have people that are nurses' aides. There are now 2 nurses in the community that we're proud that we funded for the first time. There's a young man who wants to study to become a doctor. And some of the older people said, that never would have happened before without your solidarity. And so, I mean, these are some of the things that with just a little bit of money. We're not talking a lot of money. It costs about a little bit over $250 a year to sponsor a kid to be able to stay in school. So, people just donate whenever they can, $5 a month, whatever they can, and they can do that through our website. And it really, really helps people that literally cannot stay in school without our solidarity.
Good. And we'll show on the screen the website and the address if people want to mail a check and so forth to contact New Dawn.
Thank you. And I mean, I know some people can't donate a lot. I mean, working with the wonderful people in New Dawn every week as I do, I know that a little bit goes a very, very, very long way for them.
Another program that you've mentioned is the clean water program.
Yes.
A lot of places in the world just do not have safe drinking water.
Most definitely.
And the people here are pushing ahead for clean water. Tell us about that program.
Yeah, New Dawn is located about 2 hours from the border with Mexico, and it's very hot and humid. When we go there, it is ridiculously hot and humid, and there was a real lack of clean water. The wonderful Spanish Catholics who had helped them to create the community, they highlighted in the video Father Juan Jose Aldaz. They had developed a well with the community in the very early years, but the well fell into disrepair. So when we started working with them in 2013, the community only had access to water 2 hours a day, every other day, to clean water. And this is very crucial, especially for young kids. So we were able to get a grant from the Rotary Club, the International District Rotary Club in Seattle. We really like to thank them. And they gave us a little grant, and we worked with people in Guatemala. The Rotary requires you to do that, and we worked with a Rotary in Coatepeque, the nearby town, and we hired a local indigenous water engineer. The majority of the people in Guatemala are indigenous, and this gentleman, Diego, had gotten his education, and he's a water engineer, indigenous person from Guatemala. Worked with him, and we were able to, with his help and working with the community, to repair the old well that the Spanish had helped with them. So now they have water 24/7 in the community. However, since the community is growing, Glenn, we're not sure that that's going to provide enough water in the future. So right now we're working with the community to purchase some land that's nearby, and we're hoping the community is doing most of the fundraising. We're doing a little bit of it, and with that we hope that we'll be able to buy this land that has a spring on it that will provide them sustainable water way into the future.
The TV program that I produced for March 2015 focused on an Olympia-based organization, nonprofit group that works to help people in poor nations provide for their own clean water. And the organization is called Friendly Water for the World. The website is www.friendlywater.net, and you can watch the interview or read about it through the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation's website, www.olympiafor.TV_programs.htm. Scroll down to March 2015, and there it is. It's using very low-tech, simple water filtration through successive series of smaller gravel down to sand levels, and it gets like virtually everything out of the cruddy water that you pour in at the top. And the Friendly Water for the World volunteers teach people in local communities how to build their own simple devices. There's no electricity needed. It's like concrete and different gradations of gravel, and they can teach people to do it. So it's not like something's going to break down and you have to, contact the factory in Belgium or something to do it. It's like you can do it yourself.
Well, it sounds like a great group. And in our case, Diego, we want to keep it all local and keep it simple. And he is working with the community, and they have a committee now, Glenn, that their own democratically elected committee works on the water, and they really emphasize water conservation. So they themselves are maintaining the system, and that's how we want to keep it.
Yeah, and this is also grassroots based. So it's not a top-down thing, but we'll show people how to do it, and then they can maintain it themselves.
That's what's going on in New Dawn as well.
That's really good. Also, in the film, we saw something of a community celebration, and I don't know if that's the same as this annual community celebration.
Yes, it is.
Summertime. But tell us just a bit about that.
Yeah, well, we're honored. We're going to be leaving on this July 17th. We're leaving for New Dawn, 6 of us, and we're going to be there for their 20th anniversary celebration.
Wow.
They started in 1998, and so we're honored to be there as part of that celebration. And they do this every year. We help to fund it, and it's a wonderful celebration with many different kinds of foods, athletic contests for the kids, and there's a big dance. And there's also a very important historical element, Glenn, where they talk about their amazing history of expulsion and living in a very difficult exile, and then coming back to forge this democratic, social justice-based community. And so they used to have the old people tell the story, but now they realize they really want the young people to not just listen, but to really embrace this amazing history. So now the story of their exile, their flight, and their return is told by the young people. So it has a very, very important historical element to teach the young of their roots. Their roots are people who struggled valiantly for social justice. The government tried to stamp that out. They would not allow that spirit to be stamped out, and they're a very unique social justice-based community. That story is told every year in their magical anniversary celebration.
Yeah, cool. And it seems like in every way possible, Nuevo Amana Chair practices self-government in a very grassrootsy way.
Indeed they do.
It's all about empowerment, bottom-up kind of stuff. What else do we need to know about that spirit?
Yeah, well, everything
practice?
it's amazing to go there and you see a lot of debate and a lot of committees, and things don't always move as fast as you might want, but that's, the democracy, it takes debate, it takes deliberation. And so some of the key committees they have a women's committee, they're very important. Vision of gender equity, so they have women's committee that tries to make sure that everything is equitable. And I thought it was very interesting when we interviewed one of the men, Angel, that he talked about that as one of the main important committees. They also have an overall kind of ways and means committee that kind of prioritizes tasks and figures out what has to be done in the community as a whole. They've done things like the streets and the different community projects like the tortilla factory, and they have also a honey production that committee has worked on. Now with the new water system, they have a whole committee that works to make sure that the conservation is maintained and that the system is, they have these recycled coins that they use to regulate the water flow, and they have to teach all the different houses about how to use it. So they have a water committee, and then they have the scholarship committee that debates very laboriously who deserves the money and who needs it most. And because the money is, we raise what we can, but it, money doesn't grow on trees, so
Yeah.
they have to figure out who needs it the most based on need. And then there is also just the overall junta directiva that kind of governs the community as a whole. So almost everybody's involved in committees in a different way. It's a very amazing example of grassroots democracy.
Yeah, my understanding is that there's some grounding also in liberation theology.
Most definitely.
That sort of informs that sort of a spirit.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that there's also a church committee. Most of the people, not everybody, but the vast majority of the people in New Dawn are Catholics, and they have a kind of Catholicism that they call liberation theology. They emphasize the part of the Bible and the part of Jesus' message that really talks about uplifting the poor shall inherit the earth. And so they really emphasize economic sharing and the meek shall inherit the earth kind of a thing. And so they're also very interested, Glenn, in linking up to churches here. They have a very active church committee. And so if there are people who are watching who are involved in a church that might want to link up with a really active social justice-minded church in Guatemala, they should contact us because they have a very active, very social justice-minded community of churchgoers in New Dawn.
I also understand that there are some people who had been guerrillas fighting the government who are part of the community as well.
Indeed they are. I mean, so some of the people were people who were just speaking up for indigenous rights, women's rights, peasant rights, and they weren't fighting. The government just attacked them because, as we said, as you saw in the video, the government went after anybody who they suspected of wanting to have social change. However, there were people who, as a last resort, and they emphasize that, as a last resort, took up arms because they felt there was no other viable way. And so those people, because there was a peace accord signed in 1996, the former guerrillas were, including some from New Dawn, were allowed to get land and supposedly resources to resettle and reintegrate into society. They didn't get, the peace accords did not afford them, those ex-combatants, really the resources that they needed. For example, in New Dawn, they got land, but there was no credit, no fertilizer, no seeds, no infrastructure. But yeah, some of them are former combatants who are now seeking to change things peacefully.
Yeah, so they really are reintegrating people, not only those who had been exiled in Mexico, but I mean, it really is it seems very much like a healing process.
Well, I mean, if you look on paper, it's a very good process. The peace accords, it really hasn't been carried out in a very serious way. I mean,
from the government's standpoint,
exactly.
I mean, the government's efforts have been not adequate.
That's right. I mean, the people in New Dawn emphasize that, hey, we're happy to be here. We're happy that we have land. We have a place to call our own. We have some crops, but it's really not viable economically what the government provided them. So that's where our solidarity comes in. And that's where, just a few dollars from people in Washington can make the difference between people being able to stay in school or having no options in the future.
It seems like this is such a great success, and I know other communities tried different things.
Yes.
It seems like this would be a good model for other communities to try to replicate. What potentials, obstacles, difficulties, how do you see that?
Well, I think there is tremendous opportunities to provide effective solidarity to people in Guatemala. We don't view it as charity because the U.S. government invested so much money in violence and supporting people who were murdering people in Guatemala. We view it as reparations, kind of repairing some of the stuff that the U.S. did.
Yeah.
I think the key is to find a community that wants to link up with somebody here in the U.S. And we were lucky to connect with people in New Dawn who very much wanted that. If people want to connect with New Dawn or with other similar communities, we can connect with them. We can link them up with communities that want to do that. And I think the key is to pick a community where there is a democratic model, social justice model, where that the people are actually using the resources to good effect. We know that in New Dawn. We meet with the mothers every year of the scholarship recipients who go there, and we see that the money is being put to very, very good use.
Yeah. Here in the Thurston County area, Thurston County, Washington, we have an informal sister community relationship with Santo Tomas in the Chontales part of Nicaragua. And it's not a government-to-government thing, it's a people-to-people thing.
Exactly.
And we have the Thurston Santo Tomas Sister County Association that's been active since like 1987. In fact, the second TV program that I produced in my previous series, the March 1987 program, was about the potential for getting that rolling. And it's persisted. And again, it's solidarity, not charity, even though people here have money, people there don't have money, but it's based on the solidarity, and the people there in Santo Tomas, Nicaragua, have the spirit of the Sandinista movement that had led to their successful revolution in 1979 after decades of brutal dictatorship that the United States was doing. And the United States has been trying to roll back that ever since. But again, it's a community-to-community thing.
Most definitely. There's lots of ways people could support what we're doing in New Dawn, but also if there's a desire to connect with other communities in Guatemala, we know how to connect the viewers with people who want to make connections with U.S. communities.
So what are there future projects that they have in mind?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there have been so many successes so far, and we want to build on the successes. Some of the things that the community members have talked about is to have a center, a sort of a center for historical truth or learning where people could come and they could learn about the tremendous story of people in New Dawn. And so we're working with people of the University of Washington Landscape Architecture Department to perhaps work with the community to develop a center where people could come and visit, stay overnight, and maybe stay a week and learn about the tremendous story of how people had to flee, you know, literally fearing for their lives and make it all the way across the mountains into Chiapas and kind of retell that story. So part of their vision is to have a center for community-based tourism where people would learn about their story, come for their anniversary every year, hear their wonderful music and songs, and reinvest that money in a way that would help the community. They're also hoping to buy some new land that would provide a permanent source of water. We're working with the community to do that. And another vision that they have is to connect, as I said, again, with progressive religious communities in the U.S. So those are some of the things that they hope to do in the future.
Well, I hope that as a result of this conversation and the video that we saw early in the hour, that people will be supporting your Seattle-based nonprofit group, New Dawn Guatemala. The website is www.newdawnguatemala.org. And we'll have information on the screen about where people can mail donations to. And we also will have information posted to my blog, www.parallaxperspectives, by the end of July 2018, with information including the addresses and the links to related groups, so people can connect and learn more. It's really impressive. You and I had met in 2005 when you were working a lot on East Timor, near Indonesia, in the Pacific. And why did you choose? You've been involved with the Guatemala work. You did great work on that, and now Guatemala. And what was so compelling right now about Guatemala? And we're going to be tight on time. I want to just do a quick.
Well, I guess, Glenn, going to Guatemala, I'd studied about the tremendous violence. Going there and meeting the people who suffered so palpably from policies that the U.S. promoted and funded in terms of torture, it really made an effect on me. And to meet this brave community that, despite all odds, has maintained their vision of social justice and democracy, it was just so impressive. And to realize that with just a little bit of money, we can help to repair the tremendous damage that our government did, because there's this community that is so well organized and they're so democratic and they share their resources so well. To be able to repair a little bit of the damage that our country did has just been an honor, and to work with these people who are so, they're so self-reliant and so hopeful for the future. And so I think that's really what did it for me. And there's nobody that's braver than the people in New Dawn, Guatemala. I invite people to check our website and to participate however they can.
Right, and again, the website there is www.newdawnguatemala.org, and we'll have information that people can get to connect. I want to thank Joe Swaya for being our guest for this interview. I want to thank him for the skillful work that you're doing. And I want to thank the viewers who've been watching this interview. The people living in Nuevo Amanecer, New Dawn, are an inspiration to people who live everywhere else, including so-called developed nations, because these folks are practicing genuine bottom-up grassroots self-empowerment. We need that in the United States, and we need that in other developed countries. I put developed in quotes, where economic and political elites actually dominate and abuse us. Wouldn't it be exciting to create more opportunities, more self-empowerment to meet our social and our economic needs? We need to learn from these dedicated Guatemalans. I appreciate the efforts of the Seattle-based nonprofit organization New Dawn Guatemala. They support the spirit of Nuevo Amanecer and also their practical efforts for help. New Dawn Guatemala practices solidarity rather than charity. We need to repair the damage that the U.S. has caused to their country and support their efforts in genuine solidarity. Again, www.newdawnguatemala.org. You can mail a donation to 7525 14th Avenue Southwest, Seattle, WA 98106. You can get information about a wide variety of issues related to peace, social justice, and nonviolence by visiting my blog, www.parallaxperspectives.org. That's Parallax with 2 L's, and but only 1 R in Parallax. You can also phone me at 360-491-9093. We are all one human family. We all share one planet. We can make the world a better place, but we all have to work at it. And the world needs exactly what you have to offer. Thanks.